Why do we carry out literature review? And what are the key questions to ask? If you do literature review also, you need to ask questions. Then next we need to know how to scope your research, develop your search strategy and look for literature. Okay. So looking for literature also, you need to develop strategy. Then we'll be looking at how to organize the literature that you actually search and download. And how do you do the reading and documenting, which is also a very important stage. And then how to compile your literature for purpose of a critical review and understanding different kinds of reviews. Okay, so this is basically a full day where we're looking at the significance of literature review within research and the significance of doing research, review of literature for writing research papers also. So as I mentioned yesterday, review of literature is almost like the backbone for academic writing. Okay, and most of you or all of you have sent annotations. I could read some of them, I couldn't finish reading all of them, but we will try and allocate some time where, based on the inputs that I have given, you can go back and look at whether your annotation that you have written stands the test of all the parameters that I have put forward. Okay, so you can do your own self-assessment, and later I will go through your annotations and quickly, include remarks and send them across later on. Okay, so I'll go ahead. Is that okay? Right. So the location of literature review within the stages of research. Okay, how do we locate it? When you're basically exploring the purpose of research and you're identifying a broad area of research, an intensive understanding of research requires you to do a lot of critical reading and also do a review of literature. Okay, so you do your critical review through through a literature search and then the literature review. That's the sequence that you follow. Using this, you basically identify your specific area of research much more clearly, in the sense you start with a very broad topic, but you zero in exactly what is it that you want to do based on a review of literature. Then this review of literature also helps you in developing your research questions and helps you identify all the key concepts and theories that researchers often seem to be using in this area of research. And you would also like to engage and look at how would you want to intervene in that domain of research with your interest. Okay, so to say in a nutshell, right from a generic understanding about what you want to do to going to a specific theme and area and topic, you need to actually carry out literature review as an important journey. It's an important vehicle for you to reach from destination A to destination B. Again, because you do a review of literature, it will also help you to define the objectives of your research. Why are you doing this research? What are the objectives that you're trying to achieve by doing this research? It also helps you arrive at your research methodology, and how you're going to arrive at that is something I will be talking to you as we go ahead. So arriving at a research methodology that best meets the purpose of addressing the questions, the objectives of the research, whether you're going to be using a quantitative strategy or a qualitative strategy, all that gets clarified depending on what you're planning to do. For example, I'll give you two interesting questions. If you want to ask a question, how many people are using a particular healthcare service when they have health problems? Okay, if you want to know that, then what you basically would do is set out asking people, For example, if you're looking at a particular community, you might want to do a 100% survey with just one question, or you might do a sample and ask people, do you use this particular service? Okay. You may ask them why do you, if they don't, if they say they don't use, you may want to know why they do not use, and then have some kind of multiple choice questions, or maybe an open-ended question, and try and seek responses. But if you are somewhere aware that people are not adequately using a particular health service, and then you want to probe into why is it they do not use? Is it because they are not happy with this particular health system, or is it they don't have health problems, or is it because they believe that there is some other system that's better than this system, so on and so forth? Then actually you might want to design a qualitative research strategy and a qualitative research tool, and then go about collecting your data. Okay, so obviously if you're looking for a lot of quantitative data, which is the what and how of a research, you would be more inclined to having the quantitative research. But if you're looking at the why and further look into the reasons for all the why, then obviously you need to go much more into the qualitative design of research. Okay, so to arrive at these kind of clarity about the research designs, the review of literature also will give you insights into what kind of research papers, and the insights that those research papers throw, what kind of methodology have they used to arrive at those observations, right? So it means you're also looking at how did they get this information, how did they get this data, how did they get these insights, right? So when you ask those questions, then it means you have to look at what methodology they've used and what did they report in their paper about the methodology they've used. So it means when you review some 15-20 papers, that gives you an understanding about how people using quantitative method, how they, when they use quantitative, when they use qualitative, and that gives you a kind of better understanding about what decision you would like to take. So developing the research design in order to address the attempt to comprehend the reality as well as fulfill the scientific requirements of representation and generalization. In the sense, when you have to have something represented, a reality represented through your research, then you're talking about sampling. There has to be clarity about what's going to be the sample size for a particular episode to be captured in your research and for it to be representative. And of course, people who are doing methodology or who have done methodology will have a good understanding about sampling and sampling frameworks, and then issues to do with representation, right? So I won't be going into too much detail, but just to let you know that when you are doing review of literature, a lot of these are not sometimes explicitly stated, sometimes not explicitly stated in research papers, and it will be useful for you to go through these aspects as well. Okay, so what we are basically getting into is looking at how do you do your library and online resource search, right? So when you want to study something about a subject, obviously physically you go to a library, or these days most of you will be searching on your phone or searching on your tab or sitting at your desktop or sitting in your library desktop or working on your laptop, whatever. So you have online resources that you're looking at, and you're also looking at resources offline, which is there in the library. So very often libraries have, they have books, they have textbooks, they have encyclopedia, they have back volumes of hard copy journals bound, by volume, by issue, by year. They also have journals, right? So if you have this, if you see this picture, this is how most libraries used to look, with current journals kept on the stack in a slanting manner. And if you were to pick that, slanting frame, below it you will find the old issues of the same journal. And once a year or 2 years journals get piled up, then the library usually takes them out and then binds them together into a volume and puts them in the library. So this is how we used to go through. For example, when I did my PhD, I had to almost give 1 year for literature review. Okay, so most of us in our time plan for doing research used to always mention almost a year for doing literature review. In the sense, you start with your own library. You also look for other libraries in the same city. If you have any particular subject specific requirement, like you may have to go to the archives, or you have to go to a particular state to look for research material because you are going to locate your study in that state. For example, my study was in Andhra Pradesh, so I went to Hyderabad, and that time it was the undivided Andhra, and Hyderabad was a capital. So I went to Hyderabad archives, and then since my work also was on agriculture and rural women, I went to the National Institute of Rural Development, stayed there on their campus for about a week or 10 days to do my review of literature. So typically we went place to place looking for materials and had to manually write our notes. There were photocopying machines, but not so fancy the ones that we have now. Those were much more manually managed, and also used so much of lead that when you picked up a photocopied article, you had all your hands completely filled with lead. It was like that. We also used to sit and write notes from all the research articles that we read, because you can't practically photocopy everything. And another interesting thing, and since I did my PhD from IIT Bombay, IIT definitely is considered to be more wealthy compared to regular university. We actually used to have a requisition card with an address, space for writing address. So if I were to find a research article which I thought was very useful and I required it, journals used to carry the author's address, postal address in the journal. So we used to note down the postal address, write down the article's name, and there were two options. One is called reprint and one is called preprint. So we used to click on the write the or tick mark for the preprint, and then actually send that by post. So IIT used to send all these cards all over the world, and we used to take a good 1 or 2 months, and if authors were kind enough, they used to mail these papers. So every author who published paper actually got like 25 prints of their article, right? Even now I have prints sent, original prints sent from by the journal for disseminating, for broadcasting if people wanted those copies. So those days were different, and they obviously then the time that we spent on review of literature was much more, and the possibility of being able to do an exhaustive review of literature also was really difficult. It was a big challenge. However, now things are very different. Practically all journals have digital versions. All journals have also digitized all their archives, in the sense journals that have been publishing from 1960, 1970, they have digitized even those issues. So therefore the need to go to a library and pull out a very dusty, big, humongous, heavy, black covered, rexine, covered bound volume is not required at all. So most libraries now are filled with materials which hardly anybody goes to use. So most libraries, through various kinds of resources organized by the government, like the InflibNet, etc., do give access to online resources to their own students, research scholars, and faculty. And again, another thing is these resources are not limited to you being on the campus. So you can get what is called as a proxy login. That is, you can log into your online resource while you are in your own home. Like for example, now we have logged in to have the session. I can log into my library sitting here. Okay, I can't really log in and pull out some hard copy book, but definitely articles that are there in various journals, etc., I can. So it means now we need to have a greater sophistication and understanding about how to do literature review by using online resources. Okay. So later part of what I'm going to talk is all about online resources and how to use them. But before that, few suggestions and guidelines as to why do we do this, right? And what do we get out of it? Yeah. So shall I go ahead, or are there any quick questions now? Lalita ji?
Ma'am, there is no question. This is Dr. Sharmishta. There is no question in the chat box. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I'll go ahead then. So before we talk about what is literature review, I think it's good to say what is not a literature review. Okay. What is literature review is not just a descriptive list of materials, which basically pull together or compile research or body of knowledge available, or a set of summaries. And we would often find research papers, or let's say books published by not so well known publishers, having these chapters which are called literature review chapters, where the authors just keep, literally have paragraphs written about each material that they have read. Okay. So most research scholars and students and researchers basically think literature review means you have to review 10 articles, put short summaries of each of them, and then quickly write what is your research, what are your research objectives, or what are your research questions. And that's really not the way to do it. That's not literature review. Okay. So putting together a bunch of summaries is not literature review. That only says that those are the summaries that you have summarized reading those articles, but doesn't say really how are you connecting them, what is your understanding about all those articles put together, where do you see are the gaps in all that literature that you're reading, etc. It doesn't say anything. And that is important. How are you going through it? How are you sifting it? What is the meaning that you're making? What are the key variables that you are identifying? All those are important. So a literature search is a systematic, thorough, detailed, and organized search for material available on a specific topic. Okay. Now the word systematic itself actually is a technical term, because in the health research, when somebody says that they have done systematic research, it actually means huge strategies as to how do you do systematic research. Okay. There is another term called meta-analysis, right? That also is a very technical way in which you do literature review. Since many of you are not in the health field, and are also basically let's say young researchers, you need to do review of literature from the point of view of your PhD degree, and you also have to do review of literature from the point of view of being able to write your research papers, to provide the context, to provide the background, to enable you to write the introduction, and to also make connections to what you're writing, right? Otherwise, systematic review itself is an activity that produces research papers. And I'll share some of those papers sometime a little later, because with some of my scholars, we have done such review and we published papers. A literature search is not a task that you carry out at one fixed point during a research project. Rather, you will need to carry out many literature searches as you design and conduct a study, and when writing the results of a study as a research paper or your research proposal. So at each stage, you will be looking for slightly different information from your search. And you need to remember the example that I gave you yesterday about, when you read the same paper, you read the same paper for different things at different points of time. Okay. And I was also giving you an example that when you travel to the town every day, you'll be looking at the market, but probably not comprehending the same things each time. So when you want to buy footwear, you are looking for footwear shops. When you want to make a key for a lock, where you lost your key, you are looking for the key maker. So, your requirements each time is different, though the place that you're going in for where you're looking is the same. Okay. So, literature review doesn't happen once and you stop, right? Supposing you start with a bunch of research questions, you carry out your research, and then, when you've completed your analysis, you see a new direction that's coming through your data, and you need to discuss and write. Then your guide will say, please go back and look for literature as to why there is this kind of phenomena that we are seeing. Okay, have any other researchers found similar observations in their own research? You need to go back and do a little more additional work on how do we understand this phenomena. Okay, so there are different kinds of purposes that you have when you do literature review. Okay, often people do a descriptive survey, in the sense, when they're doing literature review, they're trying to understand the canvas. Means, who are all the people who are doing research on this subject? For example, I'll say something like women's work and employment. Okay, so I'm interested in looking at women's work and women's employment. So we want to look at what are all the different kinds of research papers that are being written on women's employment or women's work. And these could be very quantitative research papers. These could be micro studies. These could be based on a historical understanding of women's employment in India. So you have variety of research papers that are available on women's employment in India, if that is the topic I'm looking at. Somebody could be just looking at census information and writing papers. Somebody is looking at NSSO data and writing papers. Somebody is doing micro studies, actually talking to women who are domestic workers, who are vegetable vendors, who are office goers, who are managers, etc. So you have different kinds of micro studies that are available. So through a literature search, probably I'm looking at what is the canvas. What are all the different kinds of research projects or research papers and research reports are available on women's employment in India? That kind of review is very, very descriptive in nature. However, whenever you do such a review, you won't be able to stop there, in the sense, because the more you read of something, you have an opinion about it. Okay, so then definitely you would evaluate and say, what do I see all this, right? Who is doing this research? What kind of research questions are they asking? Or what direction are they really exploring? Because a lot of studies that are done on, let's say, vegetable vendors, domestic workers, agriculture laborers, etc., typically are looking at women who are in the informal sector or the unorganized sector. And repeatedly, you will have findings which say that women earn low income, women have monotonous jobs, women face very high levels of insecurity in whatever they do. Women are overburdened because they also are expected to do their domestic work, carry on with their care work, and also do wage work. Okay, and then many of these women also face sexual exploitation at the place where they work. So you are then looking at work conditions. So it's not just employment, you're looking at work conditions. Then you also have questions on if women are working and they are facing such exploitative work conditions, why are they not organized? What goes wrong? Why are they not organized? Are there any organizations organizing these informal sector workers? And what are their experiences? What are they writing about these situations? And then you'll also say, what kind of public policy do we have about informal sector workers? Does government have any schemes and programs for these? So you see how you just start with one theme, but you actually start developing tentacles in all directions and developing a lot of clarity about it. In the sense, I think somebody had asked me yesterday, how much do you really have to study, to really get a sense of a subject matter? Essentially, whether you are a research scholar or you're an academic, you're a faculty member, I would say sky is the limit, because the more you read, the more you get to understand, the more comprehensive is your understanding, the more clarity you would have in your perspective. Okay, you will read your material and you also will have a clarity, and you have a position on that very clearly. Okay, and a lot of times our clarity and position also comes from it goes beyond what we read. It also comes from what kind of worldview do we carry? What kind of quote unquote ideology do we have? Okay. So if I'm working on women and if I believe that women have rights, okay, and I have a subscription towards a feminist understanding of society, then it means that that governs, my worldview. That gives me a perspective to understand everything that I read. Okay. So, uh, if people write things which are internally conflictual and there is no clarity, that immediately comes to me very evident as something that's not very clear, because the person who is writing itself or herself or himself is not very clear. Okay. So therefore, whichever subject matter that you are working on, and particularly in social sciences, you are working with different groups of people. Somebody is working on women, somebody is working on children, somebody is working on rights of people with disabilities, somebody is working on Dalit groups or with Dalit groups, somebody is probably working with minority communities, whether it's Muslim, Christian, or you working on minority communities, somebody is working among tribal groups. So whichever group, social group that you're working for, all of them have very clearly rights designated. All of them are, number one, human beings. They have human rights and they are citizens of this country, and therefore they have rights under the constitution of this country. So it will be useful and important for you to know what kind of broader, policy framework that's available. What is the broader legal framework that's available? Okay. And what is the constitutional guarantees that these groups have? So when you have that kind of clarity, all the work that you do, in a way, that becomes your touchstone. Okay. So that becomes your standard from where you're looking at everything. And then this is not okay, right? So something is not right. You're not just saying that they get low wages. You'll actually say, though there is a minimum wages act, these women get a low wage. Okay. And when you come across or they tell you that there is sexual exploitation, you won't just say there is sexual exploitation, that's what women are reporting. You'll actually say, there's Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Act that is specific for public sector, or that's specific to organized sector. How does it apply to the unorganized sector? It's of course applicable also to the unorganized sector. Then you want to know, how does it apply to the unorganized sector? So it means you don't look at findings purely from a findings point of view, but you're also looking at its implications. What does it actually mean? That's the level of engagement that you have. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you is, don't sound very prescriptive, but this is the kind of prescription I have for myself, and maybe I have it for my research scholars. Do not look at research as something that's for research. Do not look at research as something that's going to be towards a degree, towards your publications, towards your career, but look at research as a very important aspect which you as an educated person is able to do to enable and strengthen the rights of people who don't have rights, or whose rights are not being actualized, right? So it means you are doing a lot of research which is socially relevant and also socially significant. Okay, so it means there is a kind of social commitment and also a social responsibility in doing research. So when you're therefore doing review of literature, you are holding the lens of an evaluation of that research that you're reading in terms of its internal coherence. In the sense, if it has said it's going to be quantitative, is the paper all quantitative? If they've used mixed methods, are they giving quantitative data and also intermixing voices of people? If they're saying qualitative, are they doing some mistake like also putting some data? For example, okay. For example, some people, when they do qualitative research, at the end of the qualitative research, they turn all their data into quantitative numbers. Okay. For example, they'll say we have done 15 focus group discussions which covered 100 women in all. And out of the 15 focus group discussion, in 10 focus group discussions, women said this, in 5, so they start with a qualitative paradigm and then jump into quantitative paradigm. So a research paper, and thankfully nowadays such research papers don't get published, because if you have a very robust peer review, those kind of papers can't get published. But you may see some papers like that even in good journals which are there, or you might read draft papers of that kind which have what is known as internal inconsistency. Okay, so there's a methodological inconsistency in that research paper, right? So you have to make sure that such mistakes are not done when you write your paper. So when you do review of literature, it gives you an interesting lens to evaluate that work, to say when people are working on women, is it all about urban women? Is it all about rural women? Do we have enough research happening on tribal women? Do we have enough research happening on middle class women? You also ask all these kind of questions to see through all that literature, to be able to detect what probably is known and not known. Okay, so description of past research without evaluating it is like summarizing information without digesting it. So you need to read, you need to digest, you need to get a comprehensive understanding of what you have read. So it's not good enough for you to do summaries, write it up and forget about it. It's something that will stay with you. You need to know those authors, you need to see what kind of work they're doing. Because sometimes when you read one article, you'll find that article so well written and the person's writing so impressive that you want to go and search for that person and look for more what else that person had written. Invariably, they'll write more papers. And there are all these I don't know how many of you know, maybe you should note it down. Academia.edu is one site where people post their published papers. ResearchGate is another site where I post my papers in both. Okay, so whenever you're looking for an author or looking for a paper, you can either go and do a search there, or you can through your search, if you find a paper and you're not able to download it, you can go to ResearchGate or you can go to Academia and download it from there, because they have posted it there. Okay, so I'll move on. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, madam, for writing a research paper or article, what period of literature review will be ideal? Example, 10 years or 20 years?
Depends on what kind of what do you think is the period of that particular issue. For example, if you're saying COVID-19 and looking for papers, and if you put 10 years, you're not going to get anything. Okay, so for COVID papers, you just say 2020 2020 means start date and 2020. But then if you're saying that COVID-19 is one of the epidemics or pandemics among other pandemics, because we also had bird flu, we had SARS, etc., then maybe you can take a 10-year time period. Okay. So generally it will be useful to look at the subject matter that you're explaining and then think of the time period. Okay? Because you know that these are not being written, these are not subject matters that are very ancient. So you can say, supposing I am looking at women's employment, I can always see a 20-year period, but very often when you see 20-year period, you get so many papers, so difficult to sit through. Good to have a 10-year period and then. Okay. Ideal is like 10 years.
Ma'am, you told about stating one example like COVID-19. Maybe it may not be sufficient to take 10 years. For example, in social science, if we take the, for example, status of women or the education of the women, we go by, for Sangam literature or Vedic period, it goes on by, say 50, 100 years like that. So it may be, a confusion for a researcher or a paper publisher to take or to limit or to minimize the period. That's what I asked the question.
See, sometimes you're actually doing historical research, but the papers that get published are not really of the same period. In the sense, You won't have a paper published 100 years ago that won't be available. Okay? So papers are published in the recent past 10 years, 20 years. So you need to take a call depending on the topic. Okay? You can always start with a 10-year period, but invariably what you will see is through cross references, you will come back to seeing those research of the earlier years.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am, I'm taking the next question. How
Yeah.
evaluating in literature review is different from evaluating while writing discussion?
No, you don't evaluate. See, whatever you evaluate is what you write. But in order for you to write, you have to first evaluate. When we say evaluate, it means you're putting in some bunch of parameters. Okay. Supposing I'm looking at girl child malnutrition, okay? And I'm looking, and then when I have to do a search, I will say child malnutrition, and I also put in the search girls. Right? So I will get lots of research papers on child malnutrition, and very often those papers don't say who are these children. Are these male children or female children? So it means I have a parameter which says, does the researcher who has published the paper indicate who is the child? Is it a male child or a female child? Right? So it means out of 15 papers that I have got on childhood malnutrition, papers didn't tell me whether the child is girl or a boy. It means there is no gender disaggregated information that is available. So that becomes an evaluation point. I'll say this is what I have seen.
Ma'am, I'll take the next question.
Yeah, please.
How do we deal with case study for our research?
Means what? Well, if you're planning to demonstrate something using a particular case study or the voice of a person, then you give a very small excerpt of the case study which is self-evident, and you also make sure that you anonymize the person's name. You don't give out too many details about the person, etc. Is that what is the question that you're asking, or you have any specific literature review case study?
Okay, ma'am, I'll proceed to the next question.
Yeah.
From the research gate, we are not able to download certain articles. How to download it?
You just have to write to them, because a lot of journals actually have conditions saying that you can't freely, share your article publicly. There is a condition for that because most of the journals actually earn money. They ask you to pay money for downloading a paper. So it's called a paywall. Okay. You will come through an article, but there is a paywall. So those articles can't be publicly placed by the authors because the publishers can sue them. Okay. So what they do is they put an abstract and then they will have a small there which says, in case you want a copy, you can write to the author. So you can click there and say kindly, that's called paper request. Just ask for the paper and they will send you privately.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I will take the last question. I can see any format is there for qualitative research paper, how the content should be?
You basically have to look for a good qualitative research paper, which is published in a journal, Indian or international, and try and understand how the paper has been structured and organized, and that's good enough. Because there won't be one template for any paper. So in your subject, whichever article that you have seen using qualitative research and written very well, you use that as your template. Yeah.
Okay. I think it is the last question for now. Ma'am, whether it is fine to cite unpublished paper, those are freely available?
Unpublished paper means where do you get? People just post them here and there? Now, what happens with the unpublished research is it's not being reviewed by any peer group. In the sense, experts in the subject matter have not reviewed that. Okay, and what the arguments put out by such a paper have not been validated by anybody. So if you're trying to quote that as a backup for your arguments, that is a like two negatives, right? Your paper has to be reviewed now, but you're standing on somebody else's shoulder who himself or herself has not been validated. Okay, so it's always, you can always refer to reports, government reports. You can refer to unpublished monographs purely from the point of view discussing about some context. You can refer to unpublished dissertations, okay? But you can't use an unpublished paper unless it's so compelling, so good. Because there are lots of non-governmental organizations, etc. They do put out their own research reports. In fact, the paper that we've just written, which I was saying that's going to be published very soon, which is on COVID-19, we actually have used reports written by NGOs based on the surveys that they have done about the number of migrants, without wages, the number of migrants who have not eaten the last meal, the number of migrants who did not have access to telephone or did not have enough data available on their phone, things like that. So though, let's say it's not a published research, that's a report written by non-governmental organization based on a direct survey that they have done. And it talks about the levels of distress that people have. So in our paper, we made reference to that report. So you can make references to such reports in the absence of a lot of research that's available on those groups. Okay. So what I'm saying is, just as I mentioned today, the discipline with which you do notes taking, it improves your skills in multiple ways. Similarly, doing literature review in a very disciplined manner basically strengthens your ability to seek information, sift through information, and make decisions about how useful they are. Whether you're using manual mode, like going to a library and going through catalogs, or actually using the computer. Am I still in mute? Hello?
Clear, ma'am. Like your video is off. It's
Video
audible,
is off?
ma'am. It's
Yeah.
audible, ma'am.
Video is off, is it? Okay. Now?
Still video. Yes, ma'am. Video has come.
I don't know. When we took the tea break, I did something to go out and see something, and meanwhile, this whole thing went away. Okay. So, information seeking, and also it improves your critical abilities, your critical ability to appraise what you're seeing and the validity and usefulness of that literature. So again, basically I was saying, when you're using reports written by non-governmental organizations, if they're very useful and you find that there is no internal inconsistency or problems of methodology, etc., you can definitely use that and refer to that in your research paper. But you can't build an entire research paper on all those kind of sources. Okay, so if you were to look at all the different kinds of resources that are there, I have a pyramid here. Now, when you look at the pyramid, don't assume that the that's available would also be proportionally like this, where largely it's going to be like this, but one doesn't really know whether they are systematically more at one level and come down. But definitely this is the pyramid that's available in terms of the broader availability of newspaper, magazine articles, reports, blogs, online articles, and you have lots of conference proceedings that are available online. Then you also have theses and dissertations that are available in Shodh Ganga. Every time you submit your dissertation, you're supposed to send a copy to InflibNet, or you send it to UGC, and they send it off to Shodh Ganga, where they put the soft copy on the net. So entire dissertations are available. Then there are books and there are book chapters, and then you have journal articles. So you have this many kind of resources that are available. However, from the point of view of doing your thesis and also doing your research papers, you need to be very conscious about what you're using. Okay. As I told you, if you're going to use any conference research paper and want to make a reference to that, unless you think that it's a very solid paper, but it's not got published anywhere, and you really like the arguments, you really like the data, you need to be careful about, referring to these papers. Also, you need to look at what kind of references they have in those papers, which means essentially across the board, whatever you want to quote, you need to make sure that they are adhering to quality, and which essentially basically means academic rigor. Okay, if that's being fulfilled, you can use it, provided it is useful. But that cannot be the complete basis for your article. Okay, you need to use also refereed sources and sources that are from authentic source, resources that are from authentic source. Okay, then participants were asking what are all the different kinds of reviews, what are all the different kinds of papers. But let's say I put out here some the kinds of papers that you would often come across, and which is what would be useful for you. It basically means that every time you read a paper, you zoom out a little bit and think about what is this paper. Okay, is it a paper that's giving you information and understanding based on a study? It could be a micro study, or it could be a macro study. Micro study is individual researchers carrying out research with 400 sample, 500 sample, or samples of that size, or a large survey like the National Family Health Survey data, which is for all the states, for all the country with a representative sample. So that's macro data, secondary data, macro data. No, that's primary data, but macro data. You have primary data, micro data. Then you have secondary sources. National Sample Survey Office data, which is the NSSO rounds. You might use census data and you're doing that, or you're using Registrar General of India's data. So these are all large data sets. So you have papers that are written with quantitative data, qualitative data, micro level, macro level. And then you also have lots of papers that are perspective based, in the sense they read other papers and they are writing out a comprehensive paper, quoting other papers. And, it gives a kind of perspective on everything that is available. Okay. So very often in journals like Economic and Political Weekly, you have what is called a special review article. Okay. And many journals actually commission senior researchers to write a review paper. Okay. So in review papers, people are actually looking at data of literature for over 15 years, 20 years, etc. And then they write a very comprehensive paper, looking through what's really being put out through with all the researchers, and what are the debates, what are the contradictions, what are the contestations that are there. So these are called state-of-art literature papers or review papers. Okay, you also have papers which are titled as systematic review or review of literature. Again, those are also very good papers because they almost benchmark. They are reviewing 50 papers, 60 papers, and they benchmark what do we know about this particular subject at this point of time, right? So by looking at a paper, you should be able to clearly understand how are they different from each other. So essentially, literature review attempts to capture the big picture of a field of research. Okay, you're capturing the big picture through all the. Okay, so as I said, research articles are based on empirical studies. The introduction provides a condensed literature review to provide the rationale for the study, and rest of the paper is about methodology, results, and discussion. And you have review papers that won't have that format. the review paper is what I'm calling as state of art in particular area, along with an assessment of theory that is getting built or policy that the research does or does not support. And I'll give you an interesting example, not one, I can give you several interesting examples of review papers. Many of my research scholars, as part of their research, the first year of their PhD, I expect them to write a review paper. Often review papers are written by senior scholars, but since I co-author those papers, then we do a review paper together. So what the scholar is expected to do is do a comprehensive review based on the guidelines that I give. And together then we develop a review paper that gives an understanding about what is the existing body of knowledge saying and where are the gaps. And that becomes the basis for the student's own research topic to get shaped. So it's in a way part of their research proposal writing that they write a review paper. Okay. So I had one scholar who looked at burns among women. Okay. Now, India is almost like a burns capital. You might wonder what I'm saying. Okay. Many women, many of you may have seen the acid attack film where Deepika Padukone acted as a heroine. Now, acid attack is only one part of the kind of attacks that women face. Burns is another one. Okay, so women actually face burns in their own home, in their kitchens. And she looked at, and since we work on domestic violence and we work on women's issues and violence against women, we suspected for a long time, and women's groups have been saying this for a long time, that these are not accidents. These are not accidents, but these are actually, what you call as homicide and also attempt to murder. And these are violence cases, right? So she looked at all the papers that are published on burns patients. And it's interesting to see that many of these papers are actually published by doctors from the skin department, doctors from the, what is that, the plastic surgeons and all that, right? So largely from the skin department people. And invariably, or let's say from the community medicine group. So they invariably just say that these are all accidents and these are burns that women face. Yeah, dermatology. These are casualty data that they get, and they say that all these are because women are wearing synthetic saris and their kitchens are unsafe and their stoves burst. Okay, so it's true that many women wear synthetic saris. It's true that kitchens are very badly designed. However, it's a big question mark that why all other women who wear these clothes don't face burns, and why only some women who are married, who are in their home, in their kitchen, get this, right? And why do stoves burst in these homes? So anyway, she did a fantastic review, and I can share that paper, one of the papers that I'm talking about. So we actually pointed out that there are lots of gaps in the hospital protocols which don't really look at the background issues before a woman faces this and comes to the hospital. So then her entire research was where she spoke to women in the burns wards to get a sense of what is the background of these women who come to hospitals with almost 60% burns, 70% burns, etc. Okay, so by doing a review of literature, you actually are getting a sense of what kind of perspectives govern what kind of research papers. Again, long back, we've done this interesting research looking at, infant feeding and breastfeeding practices that exist in our country. Okay. This was almost a time when I myself had a small baby, and I was able to take my child to my institute's creche facility and also be able to breastfeed the baby because I had this creche facility in my workplace. So a colleague of mine and me, both of us who were, mothers with small babies, and also huge commitment to breastfeeding and its significance for the health of the mother and baby, actually wanted to do research on what is the scenario vis-a-vis breastfeeding and infant feeding practices. And around a year or two later, I actually went to UK for a scholarship. And I was at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and was introduced for the first time to online resources and searching for online resources. So I did an online search on my own after I figured out how to put keywords and search. And I assumed actually nothing much would come out. And it's quite amazing that I could print out, and I got a huge bunch of annotations of all the research that's been done with terms like infant feeding, breastfeeding, mothers, India. Okay. So then I came back and I said, look, there's no need for us to do a new proposal seeking money to do research on breastfeeding and infant feeding practices. But what would be useful for us is to get a small grant to review this research to see what does it tell us. And it's interesting, when we did this review, we found that many people do research on infant feeding and breastfeeding, but none of them refer to the women as women. They refer to them only as mothers. So why am I saying this? Because nobody then talks about what kind of support structures do women require in order to be able to continue with breastfeeding. So there are one bunch of researchers who are largely medical doctors and pediatricians who look at breastfeeding and infant feeding practices from the point of view of child health and child survival. There are another bunch of researchers who are all demographers who look at breastfeeding and infant feeding from the point of view of what is called as natural infecundity or natural infertility, and what is called as postpartum amenorrhea. That is, women who breastfeed, do exclusive breastfeeding, have a natural quote unquote sterility. They don't get pregnant during that period. So they're really looking at whether it can be seen as a valid way in which women have a body that contracepts itself, or there is a problem there. So from the point of view of contraception and family planning, demographers are looking at breastfeeding. And across the entire literature, none of the annotations have a word like women. Okay, it's always mothers, and it is, women who are breastfeeding or mothers who are breastfeeding that's existing. So the literature also interestingly says higher the education, lower is the duration of exclusive breastfeeding. Lower is the education, higher is the exclusive breastfeeding. So it's like inversely related. These are the variables and they tell you that. And then they also say that women have to be educated more to understand the value of breastfeeding, not completely ignoring the fact that actually educated women are not breastfeeding enough. What other education are you talking about? When you're talking about awareness building, but they always say you have to educate women and then they will increase their breastfeeding. So this gave us an insight that none of them are talking about why is it women not able to breastfeed. Okay. Again, when you see that among working women who are in paid salaried jobs, again, breastfeed shorter durations compared to women who are in the unorganized sector, because there you can carry your baby along. So it means wherever you can provide support structures, women can breastfeed. But when you don't, then you will not see women breastfeeding babies. So how do you start recognizing women and their agency and support structures to be given to them in order to make sure that they pursue longer duration breastfeeding, and that's good for the child survival and also good for them. So therefore, there's a link to maternity benefits and link to the broader issues around public policy to do with childcare and creche facilities. Even to this day, India doesn't have a creche facility, a creche policy. Okay, so look at the way how we unpacked the review and actually came to an understanding about glaring gaps in research, because the researchers don't carry that perspective of women as individuals, women as citizens, and women as workers. They only look at them as mothers. Okay, so then I have not published it, but I've got a very good monograph on this entire review that I have done. So as I said, there are different kinds of research papers. And review papers basically give you an understanding of the broader context, a broader picture of the subject matter and what seems to be really going on there. So all of you as researchers need to actually look for, are there any broader review of literature papers already existing? Are there any interesting review papers that already make all the connects to the public policy, so that you build a perspective on your subject matter? You're not looking at it purely as an area of research, but you're also looking at it as a huge area of public intervention, huge area where things are happening in society, and you need to have greater understanding of that. I'll quickly go through this and then pause for questions. So stages in reading critically would mean you have to have these kind of questions. What do we already know in the immediate area concern? Means, how much do we know about the subject matter? What are the characteristics of the key concepts or the main factors or variables? In the sense, through the literature, you look at what are all the variables that are being used, what are the terms that are being used, what are the concepts that are being used. So if somebody is writing on youth and employability, what are all the terms that they often come across? They come across concepts like motivation, they come across concepts like aspirations, they probably come across things to do with lack of confidence, things like that. So they need to identify what are the frequent concepts that are being used in these research, and those become your key themes around which probably you'll start seeing how the literature is actually cohering. What are the relationship between these key concepts, factors, or variables? And then what are the existing theories? What kind of theories are being used to explain this subject matter? And what are the inconsistencies or other shortcomings in our knowledge and understanding? Because as I said, the breastfeeding and infant feeding research, the inconsistencies are that your data is saying something and you're concluding something else. Okay? We often see that. For example, we were reviewing communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases load, and we were looking at these research, how do they actually factor in socioeconomic inequalities? In most of these research papers, they are referred to as SES, and SES is then diminished to age, gender, education, employment. They just take these 4 variables or 5 variables and try to categorize people. So people with respiratory tract infections, if hospitals were to look at who are these people, they'll say, okay, many of them are from the low income background. They are in occupations which give them very low wages, and most of them come with smoking as a problem. And when it comes to non-communicable diseases like heart problems or hypertension and BP, etc., many of them come from better off economic circumstances. So when people from better off circumstances are coming in with heart problems, etc., the conclusions of those research papers will say that we need much better technologies to be able to detect these better. We need to tell these people, for example, smoking. We need to tell people not to smoke. But invariably, those decisions or those kind of recommendations will not come in the papers. For poor people, they'll say, okay, we need to educate them. So you find that the research findings are going in one direction and the conclusions keep going in another direction. And that's to do with the ideology and the perspectives that these people have about what they think that they can do. Because people who do research from the health sector often look at what is it they can do. They'll rarely get into what is it the broader changes that need to be brought in so that health systems need not have to handle all this. Okay, so invariably in all fields, you need to understand what are the broader governing worldviews and perspectives that are there, and that helps you in fact to orient your own research and see which direction you're going. Yeah. So what views need to be tested? Within that, then you can get a better understanding about what are the views that don't seem to have been tested enough, and how you like to test that particular view. Few more points about reading things critically is what evidence is lacking or it's inconclusive or it's contradictory. Why study? I mean, if you are saying you want to study a research problems further, you need to have a clarity about why study it further. You know, and there's so much that seems to be there. Is there a justification of one more study? Because often people will say, ma'am, you know, there's so much of research, but nobody has done this research in Coimbatore, or nobody has done this research in Chembur. Its geographical specificity does not become a justification for doing research. Okay, unless there is something about the geography which is very important. Okay, so clarity on the topic cannot be, or let's say decisions on doing research cannot be on the basis of geography that has not been covered in research and therefore you want to cover it. I remember people, when online resources were not available, people used to write a letter and say, I want to do research on this subject matter. Can you tell me if you people have already done research in this? Okay. So they want to rule out topics which are done or not done. So research decisions are not based on that. It's on the basis of the kind of questions that are asked or not. It's not about which location has been covered or not covered. Okay. What contribution can the present study be expected to make? Yeah. So this whole question on social relevance. How is your research going to contribute towards doing something different or important or something that's not been adequately explored or covered? And what research designs or methods seem unsatisfactory? In the sense, certain research, for example, routinely people do lots of quantitative research on topics that probably are super exhaustive. You know, you're not learning anything much by the same kind of quantitative research and the same kind of multiple choice questions. So you need to also assess which research designs seem to be inappropriate and what probably one could attempt in the place of the existing designs that are being used. So I'll finish this and we'll quickly take some questions and then we have 15 minutes, right? So I'll finish this and then I'll take questions. So in a nutshell, literature review must be organized around and related directly to the thesis or research question you are developing. Yeah, and that's quite straightforward. And then you have to synthesize results into a summary of what is and is not known, right? Then identify areas of controversy in the literature. Some subject matters probably don't have much controversy, but very often you have lots of controversy about a subject matter because different perspectives, different theories, different concepts tend to give different kinds of light on issues. So therefore, there would be some internal contradictions that exist in literature which you need to understand and write about. Formulate questions that need further research, which becomes the basis for your statement of your research problem. It will help you do your research questions. It will help you conceptualize your research design, right? So it means through a review of literature, you'll get to understand the big picture. You'll get a better sense of the field that you're interested in working on. You get a sense of what theories are being used, what concepts are in currency. You'll also understand what kind of controversies exist and what kind of gaps seem to be existing, and then you will be able to carve out your niche to be able to write out your research questions and then be able to go ahead and develop a research design methodology and your research tools and be able to go ahead with doing the research. So in a way, research literature review that looks like such a boring, pedantic, monotonous job actually becomes the basis for how you go about shaping your research. When you do not do it this way, you will have examiners saying you don't seem to have done sufficient literature review, or in fact, I must also say that most examiners, and I'm also often an examiner, check out what is your reference list, what's your bibliography, okay? That becomes very important for them to understand what is the body of knowledge that you have actually checked in order to have arrived at various aspects of your research. Some traps that you have to avoid is this understanding that you're trying to read everything, So literature review is not a hugely exhaustive process. It's a very clear process, but you're looking at work, published work, and you're looking at the most relevant and significant work. Okay, so that kind of clarity about what is it that you're going to read, you develop that kind of clarity. What about the fact that we discussed yesterday that you only read but don't write? Okay, that's also a trap. It's easier to read than write, so we keep reading, but you don't write. So writing takes much more effort, so you want to avoid that. So as I said yesterday, writing is a way of thinking. So allow yourself to write as many drafts as you need, changing your ideas and information as you learn more about the context of your research problem. Yeah, so writing is an important aspect of being trained in academics, and therefore when you read, please do write. And not keeping bibliographic information. I think yesterday also somebody asked me, I have some hard copies, I have some soft copies, I don't know what I have where, how do I organize all this, etc. Right? You need to definitely spend time doing it on your laptop or doing it on a hard copy. There are software. You probably can check them out on the net. There will be YouTube videos on how to use them. Many of these are free downloadable as you can. And later when we do an online search, I'll do an exercise and show you. I'll show you how these are done. Okay, how do you actually, what do you call it? Export your citation to one of these, because when you export it to that, then it sits in your library. And when you're writing a paper, you can connect to it so that your bibliography or reference list happens at the end of your paper. Whereas right now we still are doing all these manually.
I'll take this up. While talking information from a paper, we cite the paper. What if the author took the information from other source and he cited it? Should we cite both or only the original one?
When the author takes information from some other source and also is given reference to that source, it's very important for you. You can always download that that information yourself and then make it your reference rather than referring to somebody else who has referred to somebody else. Okay. Now, often it happens that classic writings, for example, somebody is referring to Shakespeare, or somebody is referring to Engels and Marx, etc. Very often people have not read the original, right? They have read interpretations, they have read summaries, they have read. So then what happens is you don't directly quote Marx, but you quote the other author who in turn has quoted Marx. So in the reference manual of style, they give you how to do that. Okay, you probably have not gained access to firsthand to a resource, but you got it through somebody else. There is a way of doing that in the paper and also in the reference. Right.
How a researcher can satisfy herself whether she has identified a gap of knowledge through reviewing the past literature.
That's the reason why you have a supervisor. Okay? Have a research supervisor, you have a doctoral advisory committee. In a way, they have to also sit and reflect along with you whether that's sufficient or not.
Yeah, ma'am, can I take the next question?
Yes, ma'am. Suddenly I asked you. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Madam, do you think newspaper and magazines are authentic source of information?
Newspaper is useful more in terms of the importance of the data or currency that they put out. Okay, the most relevant information that they put out. For example, lots of things that we have read, let's say about migrant people or about rights-based violations, all of that is what newspapers publish, and these are written by journalists who also have gone through academic training. Okay, journalists go through training, rigorous training for being able to write. And also journalists and editors are responsible for what they put out. Okay, so we don't have to think that what comes in the newspaper is not authentic news. If it's not authentic news, why would we read it? Right? What you make of it is up to you. If the view that's being put out by the newspaper is the regular news, views are always there only in the editorial columns, and you can accept or not accept them, but you can definitely read what is being written in the editorial columns. Similarly, a lot of magazines, whether it's in a hard copy form or online form, actually exercise a lot of restraint before they put out something. So if they are putting it out, it means they are ready to challenge if there is counter data to say that you can always use it to as a takeoff point. Okay? Always use it as one of the resources that you're.
Okay, ma'am. Next question. What is the difference between use of jargons and concepts in research paper? How we can draw the line in between?
Yeah. See, the word, for example, the word empowerment. Okay, it's a very heavily loaded concept. Okay? And empowerment means many things put together, right? It has to do with it has to do with consciousness, it has to do with rights, etc. But you will find people using the word empower for everything. Okay, they would say something like, "We will empower people and teach us something." Right? For example, when empowerment as a term came to currency, media advertisements used to put out saying that women buy a washing machine because they are empowered. So what happens is devoid of the broader significance of the concept. If it is being used very loosely and routinely, that is when it becomes jargon. Okay, so very heavyweight concepts cannot be seen all the time as jargon. They become jargon if it's being used in the wrong context or being used without understanding the significance of what it means.
Is there any difference between qualitative and quantitative review of literature?
No, there's no difference. Quantitative and qualitative is part of the research papers, research design. And within the same review of literature, you will have some papers that are for having a qualitative research design, and some your review won't change much. You basically will say, yeah, there are this many papers that use quantitative observation, and these are qualitative research papers, and this is what they are saying. So the review does not change.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, and the next question is, can you speak about using? Please speak to how do we write a paper using conceptual framework?
Right. So, in fact, conceptual framework is a major component of qualitative research. You do a lot of review research, and then you're coming up with all these concepts. You start seeing relationships between these concepts. You actually draw it, and then you can use simply a conceptual framework to think about how to write your paper. So, if you start with employment one thing, when we'll talk about women's employment, there is a quantitative part of women's employment which is high or low, and the high and low is linked to women's education. It's also linked to women being part of a rural or urban area. It's also linked to women being part of unorganized sector or organized sector. It's also linked to women's marriage and fertility. It's also linked to the number of children in the. You start seeing an entire picture with all the key things that are coming in. Then you can organize your paper thinking on those lines, where you say, okay, what are all the macro issues? Then what are all the micro studies in terms of the work-related concerns that are coming up? What are the family-related ones that are coming up? So you research paper based on that kind of conceptual mapping that you do of literature. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. The next one, is it acceptable to include published conceptual models in the form of a flowchart in our literature review?
Literature review. I mean, if you're writing a research paper and you think that particular thing has significantly changed the way research is being done after that, you can reproduce it. Okay, so a lot depends on what is the importance of reproducing it in your literature review, right? You may actually use it as part of your conceptual framing rather than your main text. In the sense, you have created by review literature, but you're using it as one of the conceptual frameworks that you're trying to consider for your own research. And you have to give the source of that. Even in research papers, you'll see people put out conceptual frameworks, and we find them useful. And next time when we use that particular framework to give the reference to that source. And we also mention them. So that's how you have people often refer to them as models, right? So you refer to them as Harold Domer's model, so and so Pearson models. These are all then models that are available, which are visually to show linkages between various indicators. And you definitely use them and give source. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. The next participant is asking, ma'am, this question is not relevant to literature review, but looking forward your thoughts on mixed method relevance. In research article writing, mostly this technique is adopted in evaluation.
Quantitative researchers and qualitative researchers for the longest time, okay, had become very different, what do you call, camps. Okay, so you have positivists who focus so much on criticism, and you have constructivists who believe in experience theory, technologies. Then you have pragmatists within paradigm research, pragmatists who actually say it's not possible to think in terms of either or, and a mixed methods is what really helps us to understand therapies better. You need to know what is the prevalence, what is the incidence, what is the quantum at one level. You also need to know what is the device and what really goes on, what are the experiences, etc. So what then happens is you are using mixed methods. Quantitative, qualitative can be used across the board, and it's a very valid paradigm called pragmatism. Okay, let's.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am, when we have a certain worldview, should we just interweave in our review, or should we give a basis to our position?
You have to give basis for your position. You can't say that that's my worldview. Okay? For example, if you're a researcher and you believe that all women have to be at home and babies, and that's the best thing to do, you can't write out an entire proposal saying because you believe that. You should be able to say, are there other researchers who also, which is like researchers who have child centricity and also believe that, the caregiver who is the mother, understanding is the mother who should be the only caregiver, has to always be there with the baby. As opposed to others who would think that caregiving can be done by anybody, and women can also have an equal right to be in the public domain and take up employment. So worldviews held by you without any basis can be a bias. Okay, that's a bias then. So you can't have a biased opinion that becomes the basis for your research. So you need to have backup to show why you hold a position like that, and what theory or conceptual framework are you going by to hold that view. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I'll take the next question. Ma'am, can you share few research papers with us today, each of empirical view based on qualitative and quantitative conceptual papers? I think it would be added aid to us in following your session.
Yeah. So lunch break, I think before we join, I'll share those papers. And I think Shamishta ma'am and Alika ma'am will share that with you all. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I think I'll take a last question. One of the participants had asked whether it is fine to quote like share Lakshmi 2019 in brackets quoted Sarmishta in brackets 2014.
First of all, it's possible you should be able to get the source and quote it directly. Okay. Only if it's a very rare source that is impossible for you to get, you need to quote, and that also there is a principle as to how you do it. Yeah, there is a citation. There's an echo coming here. Yeah, so there is a that citation, and when I do the citation session, I'll show you that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. I'll take the last question probably. Madam, during this, I request you to please provide some insights about sequential exploratory mixed method approach.
Yeah, see, basically, I was telling you about if you want to know why people are not using, or let's say, you want to understand the usage rate of a particular hospital, okay? And you just do a survey to see how many people are using the hospital. But if you actually come across something like, it's an example, 50% of the people are using the hospital, then probably you devise another qualitative research to go and find out why are people not using it, though it's not far from where they live, right? So it means you have a sequential research where you started off with a quantitative and then you have a qualitative. Okay. Exploratory, particularly because you still are asking questions about I don't know and let's know what's going on here. So in that sense, yes. So that's the sequential research, which is using mixed methods. And when you say sequential, it means one happens first and then there's a subset that's taken up for the qualitative research. Okay, when you say concurrent, it means you start with the quantitative survey and simultaneously you're also doing the qualitative research. So for example, we are trying to design a research which got halted because of the COVID, where we wanted to cover something like 2,000 women in self-help groups. So when there is a survey tool that's being administered in the villages, we also wanted to do focus group discussions with women leaders and members of SFGs, etc., on certain questions that we had in mind. So that's like a mixed methods concurrent research. So it's happening at the same point of time. Whereas the example that you're asking is sequential. It happens one after the other.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Bye.